Hi, this is Keith Plunkett, and you are joining us live on Facebook for a town hall event with Senator Chris McDaniel. We did this 3 weeks ago. I hope you were able to participate. We had some 5,000 online last time we did this. So we want to try to break that record tonight if we can. No football's going on, but we're going to try to break the record anyway.
There is football tonight.
Yeah, we're going to get some football after we're done.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Anyway, just wanted to go over a few things with respect to how this works. If you weren't with us last time, you will see the ability to ask questions on the comment section of Facebook. This will go to Lewis and to Jack, who are here, and they are sending those questions directly to me, and we're sifting through those and going to Senator McDaniel with those. We'll have that discussion. Keep sending us your questions. We already have dozens of them right now that we've had before we actually launched, and we're just kind of biding the time a little bit. We want to try to get as many viewers online before we get started as possible. So to start with, I do want to go over, you wrote an article this past week, and the article it wasn't really an article, it was pretty long for even an article. It was really in depth about conservatism and really putting down talking about how the background of conservative, the backbone of conservative. We talk about Republican Party platform and policy, the platform with policy a lot.
Sure.
But there is a structure, a backbone, a history to why those policies are what they are and why we believe what they are. 13 points. Would you want to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll just go through them point by point?
We as conservatives, we do have a governing philosophy. We've always had a governing philosophy. And it began to gel in the late 50s and early 60s with names like Buckley and Kirk and Goldwater and even Reagan at the time as a younger politician before he became president. We gelled around core principles that formed the rest of our belief system. Sometimes in the modern environment, we see someone talk about tax cuts and we say, well, they must be conservative. And true that usually tax cuts do equate to conservative viewpoints, but that does not necessarily mean that someone is conservative. The same can be said for a social position. You say, well, I'm pro-life, you must be conservative. That's not necessarily the case. There's a core number of principles that we follow, that we believe in, and it governs who we are. Now, you say, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is, right now, we have so many politicians that are behaving almost like windsocks. Have you noticed? The wind comes in and they change position, they change direction. There's nothing strong. There's nothing about a backbone that changes directions. You should know how your politician's going to vote if they're truly conservative before the bill even reaches their desk, because these core principles, they force us into a consistent behavior apart from simply being a windsock. Polls are important, certainly, but principle is more important. And sometimes, even as conservatives, we do things and take positions that are not terribly popular, but we know they're important for the long-term success and prosperity of the country. So this is a way of making sure that we conservatives have a foundation. And we talk about foundations all the time because we don't seem to be, as a party, sometimes as tethered to principles as we should be. And certainly the Democrats are not. We haven't seen principles from them in an awfully long time.
You make it up as you go along.
You make it up as you go along, whatever seems to be popular at the time. That's not what a consistent governing philosophy should be. So what we try to do is to put these concepts together in 13 core points to give conservatives an idea of what we believe and, by example, what we do not believe. And this might be a good time to go over some.
Yeah, let's go through. There's 13 of them, and we'll do each one of them. And if you haven't seen this article, you can go to UnitedConservativesFund.com. The entire commentary is there. It's very good. I suggest you read it. We've even got some tweetable links. If you like some of these 13 points, you can tweet them directly out and with the hashtag we have there too, because it's important that we share these and get this message out as much as possible. The first one here is, we believe that political solutions should be sensitive to the whole human being, mind, body, and soul. That's a very good basis to start with.
Well, and think about that for a second. You say, what could we possibly mean by talking about these abstract concepts? Marxism and socialism, to a lesser extent, focus only on man's material nature. Their position is that there are inequalities that are financial, in nature. They have to be rectified by the force of coercion of government. Conservatism doesn't just focus on man's material shape, although that's important. We also focus on the spiritual side. What that means is that we understand that men and women both have certain intangible qualities, that spirituality can fill those voids very well. And self-government, in so many ways, begins with the ability of a person to self-regulate. What better way to self-regulate than to be a person of good, high-standing moral conscience? Not perfect, but just someone who understands who they are and what they believe. We're not simply Marxist animals that respond to economic stimuli. We're more than that. Once we admit that to ourselves, then we can recognize the flaw in Marxism, is that it sees only individuals as economic creatures and it discards our emotional and our spiritual traits. So conservatives do not do that, whereas liberalism does.
Now, this one plays right to one of the core tenets that we have with UCF. It's we value self-government, believing that local governments are preferred because they're closest to the people and therefore the most responsive. That's decentralization.
It is. You're exactly right. People say, "What's the big deal? Why do you pound on the issues of state sovereignty or states' rights?" Because we understand that in certain parts of our country's history, the very concept of states' rights has taken a black eye because it was associated with some very bad things in our country's history. So they say, why don't you just let go of the idea of states' rights? Ignore the 10th Amendment. Ignore those balance of powers in the Constitution. Conservatives value those restrictions in the Constitution because they're there and they're designed to be a bulwark of sorts to protect your individual rights. The concept is that the states are bodies of sovereign territories that have what's called plenary power, or general powers. States have great powers. The central government, on the other hand, only has a small handful of powers. Those are the powers given to it by Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. You say, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is when you have a massive government and you give it far too much authority or power, that can be a threat to individual liberty. It can be a threat to our rights. The founders were genius enough to break those sovereigns up, where you have basically dual sovereigns, one being the central government, the other being the states. The states holding on to the great repository of knowledge and powers that are left to the people, respectively. Why is that important? The closer the people are to their government, the more responsive the government is to the people. Think about it. If you were to call right now your United States Senator and try to get him on the telephone, I can assure you that's going to be very, very difficult to do. But your local mayor on the other hand, you can walk down to his house, knock on his door, have this conversation. It makes him remarkably responsive to the wishes of the people. So why is local government important? A, it's more responsive. B, because it's responsive, it's less likely to trample individual rights. This balance of power is very important to conservatives, and we're not for states' rights and state sovereignty because we want to do these nefarious things. We're for states' rights and state sovereignty so we can protect individual liberties and rights.
But more than just protecting individual liberties and rights, talk about the laboratories of democracy,
Sure.
the concept of laboratories of democracy.
The idea is we sometimes get really impatient. I know the liberals are very impatient, and sometimes conservatives are impatient as well. And we believe our job in life is to grab control of the central apparatus so we can enforce our viewpoints on the rest of the country. That's an improper role of government. If California or Colorado wants to experiment, if you will, with the idea of marijuana, medical marijuana, or whatever the case may be, we may find that idea in Mississippi to be reprehensible. Yet we respect the rights of those other states to be laboratories of democracy, because in those laboratories we find what works versus what doesn't work. Some states like California have failed economic policies, and we know that California in so many ways has become a failed state because of those economic policies. Better to look at California and make those mistakes and not duplicate those mistakes, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all approach where we all have to suffer through the problems of a central government that forces down a laboratory or forces down a viewpoint on all the states. Another reason it's important, when you have various laboratories, as long as you have freedom of transportation, you find that people tend to gravitate toward those of like mind. And people that may be more libertarian oriented may find themselves in New Hampshire. Whereas those that may love the idea of a large government could find themselves in California. The idea is balance, diversity, and giving people the room to live out their dreams and wishes and happiness via the laboratories of democracy. So states' rights matter because it's a bulwark of freedom for individual liberty, but also for experimentation. It matters.
Okay, third point. I think we're on third point. Refusing to ignore the spiritual side of individuals, we hope to maintain a high moral tone in society, insisting that truths exist.
The third point is very closely connected to the first point. And you say, well, what does that mean? Conservatives understand that we're all sinners. We understand that we're flawed. It's because of that we believe in limited government. And you say, what does that mean? Well, if I am so flawed so as not to be able to run my own life, I'm so flawed that I can't self-govern, then why should I trust another person to self-govern for me? We recognize these inherent frailties in mankind, and we make arrangements for those frailties. The spiritual side matters. We want people to have a spiritual or a moral compass because normally those people make really, really good citizens. And good citizens don't need a big government to save them from every imaginable, perceivable problem that could occur in their life. They're good people, and good people make wise decisions. I'll give you an example. If there's someone next to me in my community that may not have enough money to pay his electric bill, or maybe his kids are going hungry, perhaps it's my responsibility as an individual to assist in that endeavor, as opposed to depending on a government 1,000 miles away to do what I should be doing right here. Likewise, churches who have receded into the backgrounds over the last 40 years. It would be nice if churches had a more active role in taking care of the needy, so the government wouldn't have quite a big role to play in that regard. So we believe strongly in the idea that a spiritualism and a high moral tone is important to self-government.
And this one really bounces off. These really do stair-step as we go along. And so this one, to that point, our philosophy is characterized by respect for inherited institutions in which individuals develop character by voluntarily cooperating. And that is the definition of community, a good community.
It really is. Voluntary association is the backbone of this country. There's something about most conservatives when we see the concept of centralization or coercion or forced arrangements. It always gives us a great degree of heartburn because we recognize that as the antithesis of liberty and freedom. We don't mind voluntary associations, but we mind our forced associations. And so we respect those associations, and we anticipate those associations will be good people that make good associations, that do good things. And by doing those good things, you don't need so much bad government from Washington to take care of those matters.
Now we're getting kind of to where the rubber hits the road a little bit with policy, with the Republican platform in general. Living within our means is a way of life for us, so we expect our government to do the same.
Balanced budgets, man. It's the simplest concept imaginable, and every politician gives it lip service, but no one wants to make the right choices to make sure that our kids don't inherit this unsustainable national debt. Look, we live within our means. We expect our government to live within its means. It's a core conservative principle. And what does that mean? We're going to have to cut programs? Yes, that's exactly what that means. The government's doing too much. It's costing too much. We can't afford it. Programs are going to have to be cut. That is the unwelcome truth to many. And that's unfortunate that it has to be said. But it's unfortunate that the generations that preceded us have spent so much money and have taxed so many Americans out of prosperity. We are going to have to cut government debt back to make sure our kids inherit a better country. So balanced budgets, to me, that's a very legitimate conservative concern. And I still, to this day, I say it seriously, what is radical about the idea of a balanced budget? Because every time we propose this, we're called radicals. We're called radicals by the establishment, GOP. We're called radicals by the Democrats. It has to happen. What's the more radical approach? Do nothing and watch it crumble around us in 10 years or 15 years or even sooner for that matter. And it was fascinating during the race for U.S. Senate last year. You might remember that we proposed abolishing the federal Department of Education. right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you say, well, that's radical. It was part of the Republican platform forever. Ronald Reagan ran on that idea. Haley Barbour ran on that idea until we said it. Then he made it sound like it was completely out of the ordinary. We say it because there's nothing in the Constitution that empowers the central government to education. And we know that there are way too many monies being spent.
And they don't educate one child.
They don't. That's a bureaucracy.
That's it.
That's all it is.
Here's the next point, and I want to read, this one's two points, two sentences in this point. Before we look for government to save us from every perceived crisis, we would rather depend on ourselves, our families, and friends. Hero worship is not our norm, as we are not easily charmed by smooth-talking politicians desiring a cult of personality.
Our movement has to depend not on personalities, but on principles. The liberals are very, very subject to emotionalism. They're very subject to following a leader or a cult-like individual. We saw a lot of that behavior when Obama ran for president. You know, there were women that were crying and people passing out in the audience. That is not the way of conservatism. Conservatism recognizes men and women for what they are, which are flawed individuals. So we don't determine a way to build a cult of following around them. We look at the things that matter, those immutable, beautiful, eternal things that matter, like the Constitution, and like, to a lesser extent, the Republican platform. We find things we can agree on, and then we fight for those principles. And those things really matter to me. So the idea that we wouldn't be tethered to something should be alarming to anyone.
We understand that any movement whose main promise is a relief from personal responsibility is immoral in its effect, however lofty its good intentions.
Morality depends on a free conscience. It depends on free environment. You can't have morality in a coerced setting. It's always amazing that liberals want to do so much good with so many other people's money. Yet the only way they can acquire that money is by coercing the people to give the money to them in the first place. There's no good in that. Coercion takes away the morality of the argument. What we need here, if we're going to have true voluntary associations and true volunteerism, is an idea toward more liberty and freedom. And the idea that we would be managed, economically or otherwise, by another person or by an oligarchy or by a government 1,000 miles away is repulsive to conservatives.
The acceptance of personal responsibility begins with the admission of a simple truth. Government is not our ultimate protector and cannot be all things to all people. Liberty is the result of individuals learning to rule themselves.
Liberty. Look, any conservative that tells you they don't have a libertarian spine is probably not really understanding conservatism. Now, that's not to say that we always agree with our libertarian friends on every conceivable issue, but if your first impulse isn't toward freedom, if your first impulse isn't toward liberty, then you're not really a conservative. And the point you just made, I really like that. We don't seek a government to save us from our problems. But what does that mean? Can government do all good things or all bad things? No, it's a mixture, certainly. But we can't depend on government to be all things to all people because government, by definition, is very limited. There is no money tree. There is no ability for government to acquire the ability to run itself until it first takes from you or me or other productive members of society. By that definition, there will never be enough taxes for government to be what the liberals wish it to be. There'll never be enough money out there until they destroy the economy by overtaxation. So we recognize that, the limitations of government, and so we always urge the other direction, which is less centralization and more liberty and more freedom.
Another point, we admire complexities, embracing blessed variations and stubborn particularities. Unlike liberalism, it is not our desire to override the will of the people and reform them into one master plan.
I love that. Diversity really matters. Conservatives don't give lip service to diversity. We love diversity. We love complexity. We understand that human relationships are by definition extraordinarily complex, whether that be subgroupings or groupings or just a marriage between a man and a woman. These are complex relationships. Liberals see those relationships and they think they can pass the right law or tweak the right bureaucrat and they can form a utopian society out of these very complex relationships. We don't think that's the right path. We admire the diversity. We admire the complexity. What we suppose, or what we suggest, is that we want to maximize the liberty of these individuals despite the complexity and despite the natural problems that occur with the complexity. We want people to have as much liberty in their lives that is consistent with social order. That's not the way the liberals see it. Taxing is a big problem. Help me understand this, viewers. We have all these rights, and we should fight for our rights. They matter. Don't you have a right to the fruits of your labor? Don't you have a right to keep what you've worked so hard for? Of course you do. And economic liberty is perhaps one of the most important liberties, because if you don't have economic liberty, you don't have the liberty to buy the things your family needs. So sometimes we discount that. We think about the Fourth Amendment or the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, and we get caught up in these amendments that really matter, and they do. But we lose track of economic liberty is just as valuable, if not more so. And the liberals don't respect your economic liberty one bit. They're not concerned about your liberty. They're not concerned about your work. They're concerned about taking what you've got. And that troubles conservatives.
We believe people and corporations should accept the consequences of their actions, although failure and unhappiness may be the eventual result.
You know, it's the thing that bothers me the most about the current trend of the GOP. They fought for those bailouts, and they got them. And yet they'll decry when a poor person gets a bailout. Have you considered that, Ramon? Mm-hmm. Welfare is welfare, whether it's corporate or whether it's individual. And it creates these terrible consequences for society when it's not managed very, very carefully. No, I'm not suggesting we do away with the safety net. I am suggesting that we find ways to scale it back and to make people more responsible for their own livelihoods. But I'm looking at the corporations as well. When I say that, the liberals have a point when they say that sometimes corporate welfare is a problem. It has become a problem. And we should look at that consistently. I don't believe in bailouts. If these companies can't make it in the free market, they should be allowed to fail, period. But on the other end of the equation...
Creative destruction. It comes down to creative destruction. If they fail, then someone else picks up the mail and makes them better.
Absolutely. And that's a really neat part of our system. But the same is said for the individual who's addicted to welfare as well. The individual, if he or she makes that a lifestyle decision, that can be very troubling. Right now, in so many ways, big business in this country has made corporate welfare a lifestyle decision, and it's hurting the spirit of developers and investors all over the country. So I think we have to be consistent as conservatives in that regard.
And I'm going to read the entire one here too. This one's good. The rule of law matters to us. Words have meaning. We consider the words and phrases of the Constitution to be sincere and not subject to whimsical change by the dictates of a federal judge. Yeah. It is set down for all to see the fundamental American principle that there are certain rights held by which every individual, which no government and no majority, however powerful, can deny.
That is the American principle. Consider this for a moment, and I'm reluctant somewhat to bring up the Kim Davis example, but there's something to be said for the oath that she took. But it begs the question, what oath did she take? When I'm sworn in, I take an oath to uphold the Constitution, to defend and uphold the Constitution. What Constitution? If I see the words and I recognize the words, then my oath is consistent to the words I've seen. If those words are left to a federal judge somewhere 10 years after I took my oath, then I really haven't taken an oath to the document at all. I've taken an oath to a federal judge. And I want to be really clear. The federal judiciary has usurped far too much power. They've done far too much, and they've caused great damage to the form of government in this country. I did not swear an oath to a federal judge. No officer swears an oath to a federal judge. It is not within their prerogative or their powers of the Constitution to reform that Constitution in their own image. Ted Cruz called them philosopher kings the other night. And that's exactly how they see themselves. These 9 unelected lawyers that can sit in Washington, D.C. with the protections that entails can then amend our Constitution. I hate to use this phrase, willy-nilly. They can amend our Constitution.
That sounds like a hashtag.
It does. It really does. Via judicial dictate. And it begs the question, what have we sworn to? There is an amendment process in the Constitution. Look at me for a second. The people that tell you the Constitution is a living document haven't been paying attention to constitutional interpretation. The document is not a living document to the extent that judges can change it as they see fit. It's only a living document to the extent that the people can amend it as the people see fit. And if that's not the case, then why was there an amendment process placed into the Constitution so many years ago? It is proof positive that it's not the federal judiciary's place to redesign the document. It's the people's place to redesign the document if we so choose, and we've done it numerous times since its adoption, since its ratification. So the judiciary has taken too much power, and frankly, it's time that we begin to say no. I've had enough of overactive federal judges. They've done far too much damage to this country, and Congress has the power to rein them in. It's just right now we don't have people in Congress with the guts to do what they're supposed to do.
If you're joining us in the past 10 minutes now, in the middle of this, we're going over a list of 13 points. It's based on an article, a commentary Senator McDaniel wrote last week regarding basically the backbone points of what conservatism is and how it works in conjunction with our Republican platform, at least how it's supposed to work in conjunction with our Republican platform to form the basis of our actions politically.
And remind them, Keith, that we will be taking questions here in just a moment.
I was getting there.
Okay,
I was getting there.
Starting in the text here.
We will be taking questions in just a moment.
Absolutely.
Okay. Here's another point. We're going to finish these points out, and then we'll start taking those questions. We reject philosophies rooted in collectivism, particularly when coerced by the power of the state. Consequently, we reject racism, sexism, and other forms of identity politics. This is something that's really big in our culture right now that needs to be addressed.
The conservative, like the libertarian, values the individual more than it does collectives. And if any conservative tells you otherwise, I would suggest that they are not truly conservative. Last year during the race, we were accused of being racist. These terrible things were said about us. Conservatism in its root form can't stand the concept of collectivism. Racism is just another form of collectivism, and consequently we reject those formulations, just as we reject sexism or any ism that occurs on the basis of class or categorization. Conservatives see the individual, and we judge the individual respectively. I think that's an important part of what we believe. I've never liked the idea of identity politics, which is exactly what the Democrats have done for the last 30 years. They can't seem to name a core principle. What they do believe is that they can somehow cobble together all these identity groups and then use wage issues to drive those groups apart from their own individual nature, apart from conservatism, apart from the things that make this country great, and in so doing, win elections at the cost of a free society. Collectivism is bad. Centralization is bad, whether it's race or whether it's government, and conservatives reject that naturally.
Last point. Each American citizen, regardless of wealth or power, should have an equal voice and right to petition the halls of power without the corrupting influences of political favoritism, cronyism, and nepotism.
Absolutely. Conservatives see people as individuals worthy of protection, each having dignity and the rights to have that dignity and their livelihoods and lives protected. The idea that the government is only beholden to the wealthy, the rich, or the connected is offensive to conservatives. Many of us were not fortunate enough to grow up in country clubs. Not that there's anything wrong with a country club, but we recognize that there right now is a disproportionate amount of influence being pushed through D.C. and through Jackson with those that have inordinate amounts of wealth. Now, that's not the government's place to fix that necessarily. The government needs to provide equal opportunity, but equal outcome is something left to the genius of the individual. But at the same time, the idea that I would listen less carefully to someone simply because they happen to have less money strikes me as being anti-American, doesn't it? Look, there's so much cronyism and favoritism in our system right now. We see it. We know it's there. We're trying to root it out. We tried to root part of it out last year. We'll keep trying to root it out. But you should make your voices heard. Just because you happen to make minimum wage or just because you happen to be a blue-collar worker doesn't mean that your voice is just as important as Mitt Romney's or just as important as George Soros or whomever else we may talk about who's incredibly wealthy. So conservatives look at you at the individual, Just as we don't like collectives, we don't like breaking people into classifications. Everybody is equal in our eyes, and we hold all to equal dignity.
We're going to start with our questions now.
Okay.
We've got quite a few to go through in the next 30 minutes, so we'll get started. Wayne Holder asked, what will it take for Mississippi to get rid of Common Core?
It's going to take a legislature that actually shoots straight with the people. And last year, that's not what happened. They passed a bill, I believe it was SB 2161, and it purported to do away with Common Core, when in fact it did absolutely nothing to change the idea or the concept of Common Core. Look, this is an easy calculation. We have a number of leaders in Jackson that want to hold on to the idea of Common Core, even if it's rebranded, if for no other reason than to maintain the possibility that federal monies could be available. We have to get rid of the idea that federal monies are going to save this state, particularly in education. Look, it's going to take strong leaders that will insist to their Senate leaders and to their House leaders that real change is going to take place. And that's all I can say about that. You have to make sure you elect people that have enough courage and enough bravado to walk into a House or walk into a Senate and to do the right thing even when it hurts. And last year they tried to fool us with 2161, and I'm very pleased the governor vetoed that, and I'm looking forward to a new piece of legislation this year that will finally and firmly get rid of Common Core, no matter what the name may be.
We're getting a lot of questions on this. We knew we were speaking of Common Core and funding for schools, Initiative 42.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on funding MAEP and Initiatives 42 and 42A? That's a deep subject. We could go into a lot of different rabbit holes there.
All right, this is another thing. You have to give the Democrats credit for what they've done here. They've created a piece of legislation years ago that attempts to hold future legislatures under the same strict standard, whether or not the money is there or not. And the way they phrased it was actually very well done, adequate. So if you fall short of that, it's by definition inadequate, which may or may not be the case at all. Look, my family is a family of professional educators. My father was a professor. My wife's a teacher. Her mother spent 42 years teaching. That's all I've ever known. My kids are in public school. I went to public schools. I value the public school system. But we also have to make some very strong decisions about what's working and what's not working. Simply throwing money at the issue isn't going to solve the problem. Our bureaucracy right now is completely out of control. We have far too many school districts. We have far many school administrators. They're getting paid far too much money for the jobs that they do. Where teachers, on the other hand, are struggling. And I get it, because I've been a part of that equation my entire life. I know how little teachers make. I know how hard it is to make ends meet on a teacher's salary. So teachers are struggling, and they want answers. But the answer certainly isn't an initiative that's so broadly worded that it could give that type of power to a judge in Hinds County or wherever he may be to actually change the system by dictate, the same people who were criticizing earlier, and perhaps do great, great damage to the legislative process. Here's the reality. No matter how much money we wish we could spend or couldn't spend, it has to be there first. And over the last several years, we've been in a recessionary period. There hasn't been as much money available for education and other perks of state.
But still, the education's got the bulk of the increases over the
They've gotten a lot of money, and that's just the reality over the last several years. They've gotten a lot of money, but the scores have remained somewhat static. And I hear the argument that, well, if we get more money, we'll just see. Well, if they get that money, and if a judge is dictating that money, what are you willing to cut? And when you start asking those tough questions, usually they're met with blank stares. I noticed the junior college board came out just this last week criticizing the concept of the idea behind Initiative 42, and with good reason. They know what we know. If that judge dictates to us what we must spend, that money has to come from somewhere. And so every state agency is going to be put in a tremendously difficult position if this initiative goes through. And frankly, it's just bad law. It's just bad law. If you want a legislature that's going to do the right thing every time, from your perspective, then elect a legislature that's going to do those things. Don't amend the Constitution and take power that belongs to the people's branch and give it to a judge who's unelected. Well, some are elected, aren't they? Not by Jones County, but by the people of Hines County, to make these decisions for us. So I can go on and on about Initiative 42. There are some good fighters out there right now fighting against this initiative. I know Russ Latino is fighting really hard against it, and others in Jackson. Look, it's a bad idea. It's a bad time. And I'm hoping that people of good sense and good reason stand up and say enough. And I'm looking forward to watching these groups organize and bring that power to bear over just the next few weeks.
And on Initiative 42, there was an article that came out just this week that connected the author of Initiative 42, or one of the co-authors of Initiative 42, David Ciara, who is from New Jersey and is with the Education Law Center up there, to how New Jersey has done up there. Basically, over the past, since mid-1980s, there's been some 20-something lawsuits filed. New Jersey is now spending billions and spending more per pupil than they ever have. But again, those test scores
are static.
They're still
static.
Still flat.
And that's something that's happened in Mississippi over the last 20 years. As we've increased pupil expenditures, that is per pupil expenditures, the test scores have remained relatively static, and that's problematic. We have to start asking, why is that? And look, we have to be honest with ourselves as well. As a person who grew up in a public school and been around with these children my entire life, the best thing we could do for our kids to make them fulfill their educational hopes and dreams is to be good parents. And I know that drives the left crazy when I say that, but the state cannot take the place of a mom and a dad. It was never supposed to take the place of a mom and a dad. And throughout my life in public education, what I've seen over and over and over again, those kids that have two parents that play an active role in their lives, or for that matter, just one parent that plays an active role in their lives, those kids achieve greatness in education. What we can't do, however, is to drop those kids off at 8 o'clock in the morning, come back and get them at 2:30 and expect miracles to be made. That's just not the way the human mind works. It's not the way the system works. And why am I venting here? You know, you think about it. I was really pleased last night to see Ole Miss win that football game.
I listened to it all the way home from, I was in Oxford actually, driving home, listened to it all the way.
I know people that would drive 7 hours one way in driving snow through a hurricane to take their kids to a football game. But they won't drive 10 minutes to get extra tutoring. We have to face it, Mississippi, and we don't value education the way we should as parents and as people. We value sports. We value other assorted things. My son loves fishing, for example. He likes fishing a lot more than he likes math. So it's my job to make sure he likes math as much as he likes fishing.
Or at least that he does math. Not necessarily that he likes it.
So it's a very tough thing to fix. But we can fix it without a judge intervening from Hines County with such broad, non-specific language. The arguments they make that this language is somehow going to be tightly contoured or confined is hogwash. It breaks against everything we know about judicial interpretation. You give a judge that kind of language that's broad, good luck with that.
Interesting thing, I was looking at the interesting, just a little point about spending and scores. The SAT scores in 2012 were the lowest they've been since 1980. The largest bump in SAT scores since 1972 in Mississippi was in 1984. That was when dollars per pupil actually decreased. There's no, it just goes to prove the point. There's no connection between the money and the response when it comes to testing.
Makes sense. You know, money doesn't hurt, I get that, but if it's not there, it's not there either. Bad. Initiative 42 is just not a very wise amendment at this time.
And the schools that get the MAEP money as a result, if that's what, of course, it could be anything. It doesn't just fund MAEP. It could lock in Common Core. It could change curriculum. The wording is so broad, anything could happen.
Wouldn't you love to see that money actually make it to the teachers and the kids? I mean, just the money actually make it to the classroom. That would be a great first step compared to what we've got now. When we pay our state superintendent of education more than $300,000 per year, that's That's
Well,
problematic.
and the school districts that will get the majority of that money as a result of that formula are the very ones that have more, spend more administrative
Sure.
than the superintendents than they do in the classroom.
Sure.
So, let's see, here's a good one. What are some of your ideas to reach, and we mentioned something about this in the first 13 points. What are some of your ideas to reach out to some of black communities that aren't as conservative as some, and to show that Republicans aren't the enemy because some people only see Republican or Democrat?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think this whole two-party system we're in now does a disservice in the debate. You've got to move past just seeing an R or a D. It's bigger than that. At the core of the debate is whether one is for liberty or one is for statism. That's really the core of the debate. And as we trend towards statism, that concerns me. As we trend toward liberty, I tend to be more excited about that. And I think that no matter who you are or where you're from, the idea of liberty should be very persuasive. The idea that you get to keep more of your hard-earned money. The idea that there's not going to be favoritism played to those above you, or at least theoretically above you. The idea that we're all equal in the same playing field, that matters. And we do need to reach out, but not to pander. We reach out with a strong conservative message that's consistent and that shows people that this country and capitalism and the ideas behind it, they work. It's always worked. What I don't like is the idea of pandering to individual groups trying to get their vote. I mean, we saw amnesty when Reagan did it back in the 80s, didn't assist us with that demographic. And the Republicans trying to make the same mistake now they made then. This is not about pandering to demographics. It's about pandering to the individual. It's about empowering the individual. If we empower the individual, the collectivist will have no place to go, no place to hide. And so as we reach out to these groups, let's empower them as individuals, not as groups. The idea of collectivism should be repulsive to conservatives. Look at it from the standpoint of how we can embrace people and make them better as individuals, as opposed to how we can use group identity or group politics to force everyone into a particular place. That's always been problematic to me.
We're getting down to about 18. We're at 18 minutes left in this this segment. We may do a second segment depending on how things go, but we're down to about 18, and we're getting a lot of questions on a couple of different points. One we definitely want to go over is with respect to the presidential election and the debates. But another one that's just coming in many different forms here is about the flag.
Yeah.
And rather than ask every single nuanced question here about the state flag, we'll just talk about it in general. How about it?
Sure.
Maybe we can answer a few of those questions all at once.
Sure. Everywhere I go, this is a hot topic. And I've noticed that a lot of my colleagues just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's time to talk about it. I don't like the idea of hiding. Either you're for the flag or you're against the flag. And the idea that you would have to go home and pontificate strikes me as disingenuous. You hear that a lot now.
Yeah.
I haven't given it much thought, they say. What's to give? Either you're for it or you're against it. Here's the thing. Political correctness is one of the greatest enemies America has at this point, for a number of different reasons. The first of which, it literally stifles free thought and free speech. You know, for liberals to be so conceivably open-minded, they really hate free thought. They only like the thought that they agree with. And if they don't agree with your free thought, it needs to be outlawed, banned, or somehow ridiculed into submission. Free thought means just that. If you're going to be open-minded, let's be really open-minded. And let's consider that a flag means many things to many people. Some see it as a symbol of X, some see it as a symbol of Y, others see it as a symbol of A, whatever the case may be. But a state can't be all things to all people, just as a flag can't be all things to all people. If we're talking about getting rid of something that's truly offensive, let's start with the IRS. Let's start with the State Tax Commission. Let's start with some of these terrible programs, I think, that are in state government that I think are wasteful and need to be eliminated because they offend me greatly. That's not the way the system works. This is the way the system works. In America, the price we pay to live in a free society is to occasionally be offended. That's just part of it. Things are going to offend us. What we have developed in this country is a group of professionally offended. And what they do is they go from issue to issue looking for somebody to criticize or ridicule so they can make more money or they can use it as a wage issue to get reelected. Enough of that. We empower those people whenever we cave to those people. Enough caving. Political correctness is a problem. That flag is being attacked because of political correctness. I'm going to vote to retain the flag, period. If it comes before us in the legislature, if it comes back before us to the people to vote again, I'll vote to keep the flag for that reason as well. And we'll let all the other arguments be made pro and con, but at the end of the day, it's about political correctness and what kind of power we're willing to concede to the left. And frankly, I think they have enough power already. I'm not willing to concede any more power to them.
We've got a question here about illegal immigration that will probably launch us into the presidential elections
Sure.
and debates a little bit, since that's such a hot topic there. The Democrat Party has been building its base, this is from Ray White, the Democrat Party has been building its base through the influx of illegal immigrants. The mainstream Republicans are leaning greatly to the left. With all of this being said, in your honest opinion, can we bring back true conservatism into power and on a national level?
Well, you can, but it's going to have to start in the states first. There has to be tremendous pushback from the states because Congress is reluctant to change the status quo. Now, if you're in Congress right now and you're making all that money and having all those perks, you might be reluctant to change the status quo as well. Corporate America is reluctant to change the status quo, and you can rest assured that the Chamber of Commerce really needs, in their mind, an open border concept, or an open border amnesty reaction. I disagree with that. There are more than enough jobs for Americans to work. And how do we know this? Well, we see the unemployment numbers, first of all. Second of all, we have this vast number of people that have dropped out of the labor market because they can't find a job. And no one really knows what that number is, but we do know an awful lot of Americans are on unemployment, and an awful lot of Americans are on welfare. Now get this, we can send a man to the moon, but we can't create a database spreadsheet that overlaps two, I think, interesting dynamics. The first is there are a whole bunch of people that want jobs in this country, at least theoretically. And there are a whole bunch of people that may not want jobs that are on welfare, but they're on this end. Over here, we hear the chamber saying there are jobs that they need to fill, and they can't find people to fill these jobs. Take this database, merge with this database, and the people that don't go to work, they lose their benefits. That's not a terribly difficult thing to understand. It's just that right now, that's not really what the end game is. What the Chamber of Commerce wants is more cheap labor. They don't want to fill the positions. They want to fill the positions for far less money than what they're paying the positions now. The problem with that is we're a welfare state. You say, what does that mean? Well, no matter where you look right now, there are dozens and dozens of public benefits available to all sorts of people, whether they should be or not. You cannot have unfettered immigration into a welfare state. It's self-defeating. It's suffocating. We know this because right now the average immigrant household, particularly legal, is receiving a greater number of public benefits than they're paying into the Treasury, which creates an upside-down effect for all of us, thus subsidizing the Chamber of Commerce and those lower amounts of money they're paying these employees. Look, illegal immigration has to be stopped, period. It's one of the primary reasons I don't trust Marco Rubio anymore, with respect. Marco Rubio has done great in the debates. He's been an outstanding debater. He's very articulate. He's a handsome guy, but he was also part of that game debate, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Now he says he really has changed his mind again. That's a big issue to be equivocating on. Borders matter. Security matters. Public benefits, they're being wasted, that matters. We have to make sure there's no amnesty. We have to make sure that we stop the flow of illegals into this country once and for all.
On that subject, how can the state of Mississippi stop the Syrian refugees from coming into our state? We got earlier questions with the European issue with refugees as well, but
that's a great question. How do you stop it? There was a Supreme Court case just a couple of years ago dealing with illegal immigration. You might remember. The liberal bloc of the court, with 5 votes, ruled against the conservative bloc, 5-4. Scalia, in his dissent, talked about sovereignty, and he basically said that if a state is not sovereign enough to control its own borders, then it has no sovereignty at all. In his mind, the quintessential power of a state is to control its borders, particularly the entry into its borders. The Supreme Court, again, always wants to expand the size and scope of the central authority because they're a part of the size and scope of the central authority. They basically ruled that that was a federal issue and that the states could not enter that scope because they were preempted. I think they would make the same ruling in this regard, and I think that is absolutely the incorrect ruling. I think if Mississippi wants to insist that refugees do not come within its borders, the legislature is empowered to do that. I just believe the Supreme Court will probably stand in our way of doing that. Now, right now, there are 19 million refugees in the world, and that's one of the highest number of refugees that we've seen since the end of World War II. What's causing this? Global disruption in a lot of different areas. That's what's causing it. And most of which is unrelated. Could be Afghanistan, could be Syria, could be parts of Central America. But because of this great unrest and the inability of Western nations to control the immigration policy, refugees are looking for places to go. And you can't blame them. If I were a daddy to a son, I would try to find a safe place for him as well. But at the same time, countries have to be countries of laws, and we have to have sovereign states, and those states have to make sure the laws are obeyed. If we become lawless in that regard, then we've lost our original charter. We're respecting too much the flow of men and women as opposed to just the right and wrong of the law. Look, at the end of times, we recognize there's going to be disruptions. But we also recognize there has to be law and order. And right now, our immigration policy needs more control. This refugee policy, as tragic as it is, needs to be controlled by the Europeans and the Middle East and other places that are affected, as opposed to America having to be the world's police force and to solve all these problems. There has to be a better way than what we've seen. Mississippi, certainly, it should be within its prerogative to take the law in its own hands in this regard and to do what it needs to do. I'm not so sure the Supreme Court will allow us to do that. We'll see.
Matthew Lehman asked, why doesn't Mississippi have our primaries early when it matters for electing the presidential nominee? We tried the Secretary of State was looking to do the SEC primaries this year, join that group of states.
Yeah.
We didn't do it. The Lieutenant Governor held that up, and we're still on March the 8th instead of March the 1st.
Right.
I don't know if Matthew was speaking about jumping it up even sooner than that, but early primaries, what's your thoughts on?
It's a good question. I wish we had a bit more influence in that regard. Our voting system right now, particularly from my mind, is very troubled. Our absentee ballots are ripe with fraud. Our regular system in some counties is fraudulent. So, it's funny. A lot of Americans don't vote any longer. And I think a lot of that is because they lack faith that the system is actually going to be fair. We have to make sure the system is fair. And as far as when the primary is held, I get both sides of the equation. I just wish it would hold a bit later so it'd be more of an impact.
We've got roughly 7 minutes left before we go off for this first hour. Let's talk a little bit, because we promised we were going to do some of that. Let's talk a little bit about the presidential debate.
Yeah.
And who you thought performed well, who didn't. Carly Fiorina had this great bump because she really took Donald Trump head on. One of the things I noticed, and we were talking about this earlier, is the extent to which CNN in this particular case really wanted to start arguments, but almost every question was, so-and-so thinks this about your policy, tell them why they are wrong. And it's almost as if trying to get seemed to me like a bit like an attempt to get a bump of ratings.
I was so disappointed. I was disappointed in CNN. I was disappointed with the behavior of the candidates. I was disappointed in their proclivity to basically behave the way they behaved. And I won't put a word to describe it. It was just unusual to see the next president of the United States and a group of men and women that were behaving in a very unprecedented way.
And some of them refused to do so. Some of them actually did, but then they stopped giving them quite as much time to speak.
Here's the thing, it's really a shame our system has come to this, and it's come to this in large part because we have a great number of people who aren't paying attention. And what they do pay attention to are to small, subtle remarks, sound bites, that catch on the mainstream media. And so the candidates now aren't speaking their mind substantively about important topics. They're trying to find the right gotcha moment. And they're hoping the right gotcha moment propels them into the 24-hour news cycle or they have 2 or 3 days of positive coverage because what they said was clever or funny or just odd sometimes. That's a real problem. As conservatives, we pride ourselves on being reasoned people and being rational people. That's the way my father raised me. And people, a lot of liberals attack me for a lot of different reasons, but I would hope they would respect my ability to debate and to engage in these ideas. That's not what conservatives are doing right now. We're more concerned about that gotcha moment, and we're behaving an awful lot like liberals in that regard. Look, I want to hear intellectual debate that matters. Is it too much to ask for the question to be asked to these individuals, not as a gotcha moment, but for them to articulate their views and their principles and their hopes and dreams for this country, perhaps even without a moderator? These are
interesting.
These are grown men and women. I'm sure they can have this discussion as grown men and women. And if someone in the group won't let the discussion take place naturally and normally with the right flow, then we'll see that someone is just being objectionable.
We'll put a trap door under them and punch the buttons, right?
It's like a gong show.
Donald Trump, you're fired.
Remember the gong show in the 80s or 70s that pulled them
Yeah.
off?
Oh, yeah. With the big book.
I just think it's a real shame. And look, people know that you and I work with Ted Cruz, and we're his statewide chairs, and I don't really share my viewpoints on all of this a lot. Let me just say this. Please, whichever direction you go, look for people of consistency. You may think Ted Cruz is absolutely out of his mind. You may not like his hair. Whatever the case may be. Sometimes we look at politicians and we say, I just don't like that guy. That's fair. A gut reaction, a gut instinct matters. Live with it and go forward with it. But consistency and integrity matters as well. And when you find these candidates that all of a sudden have found this great conservative voice, I would just suggest that you take about 30 minutes one evening and dig back in their past, dig back in their background, do your own independent research that's not filtered by the mainstream press or by social media, and you'll see that in this race right now, out of all of those men and women, there may be 3 or 4 consistent conservatives in the entire bunch. And the rest are either Johnny-come-latelys or just telling you what you want to hear.
And speaking of the fact that we're co-chairs for the Cruz campaign for Mississippi, we are constantly looking for more volunteers. Laura Van Overstel, she should make sure we give it a plug right here. So.
It's funny how that works. I say we're not going to get involved in that tonight and pick and choose. Right,
but I'm gonna.
But at the end of that, let's plug Ted Cruz. Look. There are 3 or 4 candidates that I like a lot. I like a lot, and I can't tell you all 4 because the rest would hate my guts then and tell me I'm not a conservative any longer. That's something else that's funny about some of the conservatives in the state. If I were to come out theoretically and criticize candidate B, all of a sudden I'm an outlier. I'm not a conservative.
Yeah, right.
Look, there are 3 or 4 men or women in that debate, in my mind, that are true constitutionally focused conservatives. I don't agree with them 100% all the time, but they've been saying this same stuff now for about 10 years, and it's not just something they found recently.
All right, we're down to about a minute and a half left.
I'll tell you what we're going to do then. And here, after it goes out in a minute and a half, we'll come back. We'll open up one more segment. So stick around. You'll see it pop back up on the Facebook page. And we'll answer a few more of these questions. But if we have time for one more, about another minute, right? Yeah.
We've got about a minute left. Still a lot of questions coming in about Initiative 42. Okay, let's do a political question.
All right.
What are you running for next? When are you running again, statewide or for federal office? You get this all the time, but gotta answer it.
Maybe the people can make that decision. Maybe we should just suggest they just write it out.
Just do a poll.
Yeah.
Say, what office should Chris run for next?
You know what? I never thought I would be in politics, and when I entered, I thought it would be temporary. And my heart always wanted to be in the judiciary. I always wanted to be a federal judge. People that have known me for years know that. But at the same time, I recognize that God has me here at this place at this time. And I want to fight. I want to do the right thing. But I want to be very clear about this as well. It doesn't have to be me. There are others out there that I believe we can get behind at the right time, and we can fight together to make this country a better place. Don't build personality or build a movement around a single personality. I'm just a human being. And what I want to do is build a movement around the conservative principles.
5 seconds.
We'll be back in about 30 seconds, guys. Thanks for listening.
So. Okay, we're back for our second little segment here for the Facebook Town Hall with Senator McDaniel. We've still got quite a few questions that have come in. We're going to try to hit a few of those before we have to call this for the evening. And we're going to have to start doing this more often than once a month because we get too many questions when we try it that way. We're going to have to try to do it maybe once every couple of weeks or something so we can cover some of this. So let's see. Don Hartness, who's of course our field director for UCF, he's been working hard on this whole color guard issue up at Mississippi State.
Yeah.
They jerked the color guard from it, and a lot of Mississippi State alumni are not quite so happy about all that. Don being one of them, I think he's been very much a big alumni for them, and his generations of his family have gone to school. But he asked, how do you stand on the color guard and our state flag being banned at a state university, MSU, that receives our tax dollars? Should we come up with a bill to withhold tax dollars from you to pay to keep their doors open? And this actually was a question earlier too that mentioned the same thing about some of these cities that have taken the state flag down. You want to?
Yeah. First of all, Don Hartness is an incredible person. And if we had more patriots like Don Hartness, I assure you Mississippi would be in fine hands. So I'm not just blowing smoke. I always look for consistency in people. And I talked about that earlier. I met Don, several years ago, probably 09 or 08. And he's been the same Don Dan as he is now. That consistency is a mark of integrity in my mind. And I think that's very, very important. So if you don't know Don Hartness, you need to get to know him. He's a good guy. To his question, Don, Mississippi State sent out a press release just after the color guard mysteriously disappeared. And they made it sound like it had nothing to do with the state flag. Kind of insults our common sense in that regard. We're talking about something very special to the people of Mississippi State, something very special to me. I love color guards. Mm-hmm. I love watching them. I love the formality of it. I love the importance of it. And I think what state is done, I think they basically banned the color guard because they believe the flag of Mississippi is a problem. And to answer your question, yes, Don, it's an issue. And yes, for a university like states depend so heavily on state dollars, but also some of these municipalities across the state that have decided unilaterally to take down the flag, that's problematic in my mind. Now the statute does give them some permission to do that. It says may instead of shall. That's a drafting error that needs to be corrected in the next session. I believe that if you are a state entity, that you should fly the flag of your state. And I don't find the flag terribly offensive, and I don't think most of them do either. I think they see it mostly as a wedge issue and political correctness and a way to appear nuanced or avant-garde under the circumstances. And I'm proud of Don's fight. I'm proud of what he did up there this past weekend. Mm-hmm. And I look forward to success eventually.
Yeah, and I really haven't even spoken with him since he did that because I'm anxious to get the update to prove exactly
absolutely.
how it went.
He'll give you a good one.
Oh, it will. I know he works hard on that stuff. All of it. Works hard on everything. What do you think about the fair tax? This is specifically about the fair tax, but fair tax, flat tax.
The present system is a nightmare. When I was on the campaign trail, I received that question all the time, and my response was always pretty consistent. Anything but the tax system we've got now. It's one of the places I think Donald Trump is wrong. I don't like the idea of taxing people in a progressive fashion. And I get that he's a billionaire and he wants to tax people in his status. Well, if he's so inclined to wish to give that money to the government, he should just voluntarily give it to the government. I don't like progressive income tax schemes. I don't like the present system we've got now. And if it were up to me, I would abolish the Internal Revenue Service. I don't like it one bit. So what are you talking about doing? Well, I think a flat tax always was the thing that I favor because of the simplicity of the notion. A fair tax is fascinating, and I've read the books, and it seems workable in practice, but a flat tax seems so much easier to initiate or implement. So I think I would prefer the flat tax, and I mean really, really low and really, really flat. I think every American ought to pay taxes, and I think it ought to be extraordinarily a low amount, and I think you ought to be able to keep the great majority of the fruits of your labor. And you may come back now and say, well, earlier you were railing against taxes as being somehow indicative of a violation of a constitutional right. Yeah, you have an economic right to the fruits of your labor. And I know the liberal mind, and they're saying, what about that? I mean, what parts of government will you cut? The answer is, from a federal standpoint, Goldwater gave it to us in the 60s. There are legitimate functions of government. They exist. You may not realize they exist, but they exist. The legitimate functions of government are found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And to take care of those legitimate functions of government, yes, there is a small percentage of your taxes the government's entitled to. Perhaps not via an income tax. Who thought that was a good idea? I missed something in the early part of the last century. The bottom line is this. Legitimate functions of government, that is, truly legitimate functions, yes, I don't think anyone has a problem paying their fair share. On the other hand, the great majority of those powers and functions belong to the states. Best to have those debates on the state level where the government's more responsive, more willing to listen, and more out not to violate those liberties that are so precious to us all.
Kathy Isles says, do you support replacing Boehner as House Speaker, and who would you like to see in that job?
Is it Kathy?
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, I support the wind blowing so hard and so fast and so aggressively that we sweep everybody out of office, including me, if that's what it takes to regain control of this government for the people and by the people. So to answer your question, yes, we need new leaders in Washington, D.C., all across the board. And those that are entrenched, those that have been there for many years, those that are somehow living this wonderful life of status quo, yeah, it's time for them to go. So that's the Jeffersonian revolutionary, I suppose. But yeah, I want to see change all across the board. Absolutely.
All right. Here's a question from Michelle Cookwood, who, we
sure.
both love Michelle. She's great. And this is one that I think we can talk about for quite a while if we wanted to. But she asks, how can we, it's in the long question,
Yeah.
How can we unite people, conservative, Republican, libertarian, common sense, moderate, Democrat, etc., on the big picture issues that threaten the very future and existence of our republic, and stop the bickering and infighting over the smaller things that keep us divided? How do we at the local, state, and national level inspire unity, life, love over division, death, and hate?
That's nice.
And it goes on, but I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Michelle's another one. I think I met her a couple of years ago, remarkably consistent. I think she's an up-and-coming leader for our party and for our movement. And if you don't know Michelle, you need to get to know her. She's the real deal. She and her husband have been kind and polite and generous every time I've ever seen them. And I don't forget that kind of stuff. I happen to value their friendship very much. Here's the answer. The idea that there would still be a moderate Democrat is mind-blowing to me. So let me discount that part of the question. I don't think there are any moderate Democrats left. Either you are trending toward liberty or you're trending toward statism. And if someone comes to you and they tell you, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, they are part of the problem. As to the other groups, absolutely, we can unify. Absolutely, these things work. And they work because we're not supposed to allow personalities to get into the way of what our overall goal is. You heard me earlier talking about these 13 core principles of conservatism. Unite around those principles, but more importantly, around the Constitution. These are immutable, powerful, eternal concepts. Fight for those things from that standpoint. Let me give you a couple of examples. What does that mean? Decentralization is a core component of UCL. What does decentralization mean? More power to the individual, less to the government. That's across the board. We can agree on those ideas. When we do finally elect people like Michelle and like Don and others that are liberty-minded, at that point we can have what I consider to be secondary conversations at the state level as to how individual and respective states will proceed. Take, for example, our libertarian friends like to talk about marijuana legalization a lot. That's a fair topic, completely fair. But it's a bit premature until we have people in positions of authority that will at least empower the states sufficiently so experimentation can take place. So right now, key to everything that we do is structural, not wrapped around personalities. Don't vote for someone because they like Chris McDaniel. Don't vote for someone because they like Haley Barbour. Vote for someone because they go down that checklist of the Constitution and they never ever violate it. Vote for someone because they take the party's platform and they believe in it and they never violate it. Vote for someone because they're maximizing individual liberty. Now, once we begin to elect people that understand that structural reform is the real key, at that stage the secondary conversations begin to take place. Whether it's, just imagine your potential experiment in a state, socially conservative people like Mississippi and Alabama versus a liberal-minded people in California or Oregon. And you can see these experiments working, but the first thing is fight for decentralization, fight for the empowerment of the state only, or better yet, fight for federalism and the empowerment of the individual. That's really what it's all about. Mm-hmm. But around those principles, around those concepts, and here's my advice, so many conservatives, at least they say they're conservatives, out there right now are trying to tear down this movement. If someone comes to you and they're saying something nasty, if they're saying something that's not unifying, perhaps they're being driven by the wrong motivation. And a lot of that motivation is self-empowerment. Those people have no business in this movement. The only thing that should be empowered here is individual liberty and the Constitution. Those are the things we're empowering. And to the extent that someone wants to break you down or hurt you or gossip about you or insult you, those people should be immediately ostracized as the troublemakers they are. And the rest of us are going to keep fighting for the beliefs that we believe in.
Here's a question from Stephen Gooch. It's basically the question is this: is it too late?
That's a great question. Mathematically, it's very close to being too late.
His specific question is to how do we force government to actually follow the Constitution, or is it too late? But generally speaking, is it? I mean, that is what it comes down to.
Yeah. To answer your question, if I truly believed in my heart that it was too late, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I wouldn't be here. I believe we still can save the country. I still believe we can save the republic. But it's going to have to take people that are willing to make immediate, strong, courageous stances, even if it means a loss of a job, the loss of a political position, or, Lord forbid, even perhaps imprisonment from time to time. That's the nature of civil disobedience, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And I am not advocating that by any stretch. I don't want to be sued for advocating civil disobedience. But you get my drift. At some point in our country's history, for every good thing that's occurred, there's been at least one individual that stood up and said, you know what? Now's the time for change. We have to be able to fight like that as a group and as strong individuals. Look, $18+ trillion in the hole. More than $500 billion additional dollars in deficit spending this year, more than likely. And our politicians are sending out press releases of how conservative they are. It's embarrassing. It's troubling. Because they're taking advantage of that great number of people out there that simply aren't paying attention. It's our job to make them pay attention. That's one of the reasons we're doing this tonight. It's one of the reasons we're on Facebook so much. We're trying to drive a conversation, a new narrative that breaks outside of Congressman so-and-so's press release telling you how really conservative he is, when in fact his record shows him just to be the opposite. We have to enlighten our friends, we have to enlighten our colleagues, we have to enlighten each other and build a messaging center that offsets the establishment's money and forces a change to the status quo. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt all of us. It's going to be painful. But if you're not willing to hurt, like our founders were willing to hurt, like others throughout this country's history that were pushing mass social change were willing to hurt, then you're in the wrong fight. I wish there was a better answer, but financially, we're right at the end of our wits. Now, I will say this, assuming for a moment that our economy could recover and we could grow at a roughly 4.2% rate for the next 10 or 12 years, you would see an incredible amount of dollars flow into the national treasury, and it would offset that deficit spending. But the reality is, because of hyper-regulation and because of the way the government's reacted, you're not going to see that type of economic growth anytime soon. And because of that, we're going to continue to pile on debt, more debt, more debt, more debt, and it does eventually become unsustainable. So, very important to know we can still turn this around, but what are you willing to do as an individual? That's the question.
Here's a great, Anthony Watkins asked this question, and this is great because you and I have talked about, especially with UCF, is developing a reading list for all conservatives to go. I always look at some of these conservative sites, and the reading list, and almost inevitably there's a book there that is presented that, ooh, I haven't gotten to that one yet. Right. And it reminds me, I'll go get it and read it. Anthony asked, why don't Republicans pay attention to the brilliant minds of Milton Friedman and Thomas Sowell? It seems that the current field GOP candidates are repeating gimmicky catchphrases instead of addressing fundamental issues. And Anthony, if you saw earlier, we did address some of those fundamental issues in those 13 points, I think, but he's getting more towards a policy. I think just study is one thing, though. But
he's right about that, and that's the thing that irritates me so much about the debate. It's one-liners, and it's gotcha moments, and it's cutesy comments. What about real policy positions? And he's right. The two men that he's listed there are intellectual giants of our time, and they're not the only ones. There are a number of libertarian writers, I think people.
C.W. Cook is a really good libertarian writer.
Epstein out of the University of Chicago. Russell Kirk, he's an older writer.
Russell Kirk.
I would always start, if I were a conservative wanting to find my firm footing, Barry Goldwater, The Conscience of a Conservative. He wrote that in '64, and you think, well, that's so long ago. They were talking about the precise issues we're talking about today, just on a slightly less impactful and scary scale. He was talking about a much smaller debt, but he saw it, and I think the principles still apply today. So educate yourself on what it really means to be a conservative. That's one of the reasons we talked about those 13 core principles earlier, and that piece is still up on your site and Ryan's site and others, something to talk about and discuss. He's absolutely right. Those men, I'm very, very proud to read their data and their information because they're impeccable in their education.
We're going to do that, and we've talked about that a lot. We're going to have a reading list that we do put up on the UnitedConservativeSFund.com website. If anyone has any suggestions of books that we should add to it, we do need to keep that. We need to keep that intellectual discussion going on, and have folks take a look at those and read them.
Our movement is an intellectual movement. There's no question about that. Now, sometimes we don't articulate it very well, and we find ourselves yelling at our opposition. But when you get right down to the roots of what conservatism is, it works, and it's always worked. It's just we have to understand those concepts so we can communicate those ideas to this next generation so they'll follow along.
Okay, we're at about 18 minutes in on this. We had nearly 3,000 viewers on the first segment. I don't know where we are on viewers right now. We currently have 200 viewers on, but I don't know how many total. It's much more when you look at total. This thing doesn't give you the entire number while it's running.
You'll notice that it gravitates, but it's much more. You'll see the final numbers.
Right. Yeah. At any rate, I don't have any more questions coming in right now.
No, we're still. I'm getting.
You're getting some? Yeah, go ahead and go to yours. I've got a list. I just need to look back and through to see what else I have on here that I may have missed.
And Jack, as they come through, let me know. I'm getting dozens and dozens down here on mine. Okay. I don't know. Maybe we're not communicating well. We have a new system. This is experimental.
I've got some here that just missed.
The thing is, going back to that first segment, the one thing I wanted to come back to before we wrapped up tonight was the idea of what it really means to be a conservative. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse tonight, I promise you that. I'm trying to get people to understand that our movement is so much larger than what so many of us are accustomed to. If you go back, And I'm not trying to bore you, I promise. I'm just trying to discuss this in a way I think everyone will understand. Think about the fights, even in the 1940s, between Dewey and Taft. You might remember Dewey was the governor of New York, very much wanted to be president. Taft was a senator from Ohio, very much wanted to be president. Taft was known as Mr. Republican. He led the conservative charge for the Republicans in the Senate and elsewhere. Dewey, on the other hand, was the moderate Republican. In this fight of the time, Dewey wasn't grounded. Consequently, after Dewey, neither was Eisenhower. Certainly, he was a great war hero, and he brought a lot of attention to his command. But as far as being a conservative grounded in the Constitution, grounded in the party's platform, neither Eisenhower nor Dewey were those people. Taft gave us a person of principle and did his very best to implement that principle. He was unsuccessful. That fight then led years later to this Rockefeller Republican concept. Again, the moderate wing of the party fighting against Barry Goldwater and the more conservative wing of the party. If you don't have that conflict within the party, we never have a Ronald Reagan. And that's why this conflict is good from time to time. People think that we're angry at the party. We're not angry at the party. We love the party. We want the party to be the liberty party it's always been. We want to save the party. And we do that by having these conflicts, so at the very least we can define what it really means to be a conservative, what it really means to be a Republican. Goldwater and Rockefeller, in their great fight for the nomination in '64, gave us those ideas. And it was Reagan, watching the fight in California, that took sides with Goldwater and gave us this great speech. And if you haven't seen the speech, you need to YouTube this speech tonight. It was called A Time for Choosing. And in that speech, he articulated Goldwater's legacy and version of republicanism, conservatism, constitutional conservatism. That's what gave us Ronald Reagan. Now consider this. Reagan comes up in '76 against a sitting president in Ford. How much more anti-establishment can an individual get than Reagan in '76? You're running against your party's standard bearer, and he almost picks up the nomination at the convention. At the end of the convention, they asked Reagan to say a few words, and he was able to say a few words. And you might recall that when he finished his short speech, which was impromptu at the convention, I think those delegates knew they had selected the wrong man for their nominee. I think they knew. 4 years later, despite all the moderate wings talk about Reagan being too radical and revolutionary and unelectable, that's the word they always like to use. They love to use the word unelectable. Despite them saying all of these negative things about Reagan, he gave us a landslide in '80. He gave us a landslide in '84. Now, I realize that Reagan did not always govern consistent with those principles that he professed. I'm not making excuses for that. There are several things he did I found great disappointment in, or I find great disappointment in. But he was the conservative standard bearer. He said the things that needed to be said, and he inspired a whole generation of people to be real liberty-minded conservatives again. You probably don't even have a Ron Paul before Ronald Reagan to a certain extent. He was that instrumental in defining the debate. Who has defined the debate for us since then? Think about that. We had Reagan in '80 and '84, but when he left the stage, the moderate wing of the party reclaimed the dominance of the party. We call that the establishment, don't we? But they did, in fairness. And what do they tell us? Trust us. Bob Dole is the only electable candidate we've got. And so we fall right into line. We nominate Bob Dole, and he loses. 4 years later, they say, trust us. John McCain is the only electable candidate we've got. We fall right into place, and we elect him. In the meantime, we do get W, and I like W as a social conservative. But we have to be honest about ourselves, don't we? George W. Bush was not a fiscal conservative. He just wasn't. He was a good wartime president. He protected us. I loved his strength. I loved the way he communicated. I loved his moments after 9/11 where he unified this country. But Medicare Part D is not a conservative piece of legislation, and No Child Left Behind is not a conservative piece of legislation. So we did not still at that time have that conservative standard bearer across the board that we always wanted or desired. And do you know since Reagan we've lost 5 of 6 of our last popular elections for the presidency? The only one we won was George W. Bush, and that was a wartime presidency. That's just a shoe-in that you can get. So we've lost 5 of the last 6 popular votes, and the whole time the establishment saying, vote for Mitt Romney. He's the only one that can win. Look, if Barack Obama can win, anybody can win. And if Joe Biden can be vice president, anybody can be vice president. At the very least, what those 2 men have done, they have forever made it clear that anybody in this country can become president, right? With a little bit of luck and hard work. So consider this for a second. I had a guy write me the other day, and he said, just how many votes do you think Ted Cruz will get from the left of center? And I said, well, probably about as many as Barack Obama did from the right of center. And Barack Obama's still president. Democrats, to their credit, they run liberal, hardcore, true believers, don't they? And they never worry about electability, they just get elected. Republicans equivocate and fight and obsess, rip each other apart, focus on the moderate wing of the party, which is presently the status quo, nominate the guy or the girl who's certain to lose. We lose, profess shock about losing, and then do it again in 4 years. Enough of that type of politics. Enough of that type of politics. That was the point I was trying to make earlier, Keith. Or anything else?
We got a question on education. I think we answered earlier, but we can go back to education takes over 60% of the regular normal asset. Education takes over 60% of Mississippi's budget. What can we do to make sure those finances can be utilized properly? That's a little bit different from the question we answered earlier, kind of, sort of, but as long as you've got a Department of Education who's willing to game the system, it's kind of difficult.
It's tough. It's tough. And I guess we'll let this be the last question. We'll close it after this. But there are so many out there. I'm still getting dozens, but we're running out of time as well. How do you make sure that government dollars are spent efficiently? That's a tough one because government really never spends the money as efficiently as we hope it would. And I think it's part of the sin of government, isn't it? I mean, it's always easier to spend somebody else's money. And if Lewis over there would give me $1,000, I would probably blow it on candy tonight for my kids. But
I wish Lewis would give me $1,000.
And I wouldn't think, or Jack, I wouldn't think twice about it. The point is that it's easier to spend other people's money than it is our own money. And government tends to grow in these layers of bureaucracy. And they justify it because it makes their respective jobs easier if they have somebody else to hand the responsibility to. Well, the next thing you know, you've got 7 people doing the job it used to take 1 person to do. And they're claiming they're spending the money efficiently. Just trust us. And we need all 6 of these new people because we couldn't do it as well before as we're doing it now, even though they failed then and they're failing now. The best way to find transparency in government is to, efficiency in government is to demand transparency. Across the board, transparency. There was a story that came out this past week about one of those developments in Jackson, in Richland. And I don't know if you guys know the story, but there's a development up there that was heavily subsidized by state dollars so it could be built. And that was a shopping mall, basically, a retail outlet place. This isn't Nissan or BMW, it's an outlet mall. Mm-hmm. And we used state dollars to subsidize the outlet mall, which I had great concerns about. And as of right now, the records have been sealed because they're confidential. Now consider that for a moment. They claim the records are confidential because of some proprietary information that could be found therein for an outlet mall, for a shopping center. You know, the free market has worked remarkably well for years building outlet malls and shopping centers. Laurel has one here that was built back in the 80s. Not a single dime of federal subsidies went to it. It just grew up because there was a need. That's how the free market works. And here's the point of all that. I'm boring everybody at this point. Here's the point of all of that. If a dollar is being spent and it's the people's dollar, it should be fully transparent. I can't imagine the proprietary nature of many projects, much less a shopping mall. And for them to seal those documents should cause us grave concern. If there's a document there that has something to do with the way your dollars are being spent, you have a right to see it. That makes us more efficient if you know how we're spending your money. It's when you don't know is when we get a little wild with it, and that happens from time to time. So transparency, and the people have to engage the system where the politicians believe they're being watched. In other words, you have to hold us accountable. If you don't hold us accountable, you are responsible for the government you receive at that point. And that's sometimes a very sad thing.
All right. You want to call it a night?
I think so. It's been a big night. We've been on. We had an hour earlier. We had about 30 minutes there. Probably approaching about 5,000 or 6,000 people that have involved themselves in this tonight. I really appreciate it. You want me to say goodbye when you close out?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Since I've been running my mouth way too much.
Well, I really don't have a whole lot to add.
Well, here's the thing. I believe this is instrumental into what we're all trying to do. Your elected officials are your employees. If they can't sit in front of you and answer questions without reading talking points, then I think you should second guess their involvement in the system. Likewise, if they're not responsive to you when you ask those questions, now that doesn't mean we answered every question. Invariably, last week I got some hate mail saying, "Why did you ignore my question?"
Well, we get lots of it, and I'm going through them the best I can. I try to build several questions, and so sometimes we get repetitions.
Well, that's the thing I think some people don't get. There may be a couple hundred questions, 10 of which share the same item.
Yeah.
So you're trying to merge it all.
Bring it all together.
But if you don't read their question exactly, they say, "Well, you're dodging the question."
Oh.
No, we're not trying to dodge anything. We're doing our best to answer these questions. The point is, as your employee, as a government official, I'm responsive to you. I work for you. You're my boss. And when you're mad at me, I'm mad at myself. When you're upset with me, I'm upset with myself. But I believe strongly in what I believe. You probably know that by now. And I'm going to fight for those things that I believe. But not because I believe them, but because a lot of strong people came before me and they believed them. And I know they work. And so what we are here is a messenger for a system, a movement. That's all we are. And even though Keith one day may go out and rob a bank, I hope you don't.
I need some money. I need to borrow that $1,000
Sure.
from Lewis.
Or I may drop out of the system, or whatever the case may be. These principles survive. The message survives. And, you know, like I was with Colby Busby a few days ago. I don't know if you know Colby.
Mm-hmm.
Another great conservative, another great young man. He is entrenched in his philosophy. He understands it. The message will survive if you pass it on to those younger people and then help them get to these positions. So we appreciate your involvement with us tonight. We appreciate your questions. We'll be back again. I hope we can do this at least once a week henceforth, because I think it is good for me, you, I think it's good for the movement. So thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being my friends. And Keith, I guess you can close us out.
Yeah, I've got really nothing else to add except to stay in tune and let's keep doing this. You know, the more we do it, the more these conversations happen, the more unity, going back to what Michelle was talking about, the more unity we're going to have in our movement going forward, and the more we're going to understand what has to happen next. So thank you all for being with us tonight, and we will do this again soon. Stay tuned to the Facebook page and all of our pages to see when that might be. Sometime in the next week or 2 weeks, we'll try another one. So this is Keith Plunkett, Senator Chris McDaniel. Thank you.